Ex-husband and ex-wife on the brink of reconciliation. What unexpected twist will change everything? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. John and Emily, a once deeply in love couple, found themselves drifting apart after years of marriage. Their love story had always been the kind that people envied, the kind you saw in movies. But like any great love story, there were twists and turns, and not all of them were good. Their marriage, once full of laughter, passion, and dreams of the future, slowly became weighed down by unspoken words, growing resentment, and misunderstandings. John, a successful architect, was always busy with work, often putting his career above everything else. Emily, a loving wife and a devoted mother, started feeling neglected. What began as small frustrations quickly escalated into major arguments. She felt like she was alone in their marriage, and despite her best efforts to keep their love alive, the distance between them continued to grow. They tried everything: therapy, communication, time apart, but nothing seemed to work. Eventually, the inevitable happened. They filed for divorce. The finality of their decision didn't come without tears or heartache. But they both knew that they couldn't continue living a life filled with unresolved issues. After the divorce, John and Emily tried to move on. They kept their distance, but the memories of their past, their shared experiences, and the love they once had lingered in both of their minds. There were times when they crossed paths, at mutual friends' gatherings, at family events for their children, but these encounters were always awkward, filled with the tension of a relationship that had once been everything but was now reduced to a painful reminder of what was lost. But life has a funny way of bringing people together when you least expect it. A chance encounter at a coffee shop, a conversation sparked by a shared moment, suddenly they found themselves talking like they used to. It wasn't easy. There were old wounds that hadn't healed, and both of them had changed. But the connection, that spark, was still there. As they spent more time together, old feelings began to resurface. The idea of reconciliation seemed possible, even though either of them could completely let go of the past. But just as they started to think about what a future together might look like, something unexpected happened. Something that would change everything, once again. Stay tuned to see how John and Emily navigate the challenges ahead and whether they will find a way back to each other, or if their past will prove to be an insurmountable obstacle. It had been a few weeks since John and Emily's unexpected meeting at the coffee shop, but the connection they once shared was undeniable. Both of them had moved forward with their lives after the divorce, but there was something about their encounter that made them wonder if perhaps they had been too quick to give up on their love. They had spent countless hours reminiscing about the good times, the laughter, the trips, the dreams they once had for the future. It was easy to slip back into that familiar rhythm. But life wasn't as simple as it used to be. John had built a successful career, but he found himself constantly working late, often bringing his work home. He realized that, in a way, he had let his career take over his life, leaving Emily, and ultimately their marriage, behind. Emily, on the other hand, had found solace in the quiet moments with their children. She had always been the rock of their family, the one who held everything together. But after the divorce, she found herself questioning if she had given too much of herself to the role of being a wife and mother. She had dreams too. Dreams that she had set aside for the sake of others. As John and Emily began to reconnect, there was an unspoken understanding between them. They had both changed. They were no longer the people they once were. John had grown more reflective, realizing that he had lost sight of what really mattered. Emily had become stronger, more independent, yet still held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way back to each other. But as they spent more time together, both were faced with the reality that reconciliation wouldn't be easy. There were too many unresolved issues, too many hurt feelings that needed to be addressed. John struggled to find the right words to express his regrets, while Emily found herself hesitant to fully trust him again. The scars of their past were still there, and healing them would take time. They talked about everything: what went wrong in their marriage, what they had learned from their mistakes, and what they hoped for the future. But there was something else they had to confront: the fear of repeating the same mistakes. Could they really rebuild their relationship, or would the past continue to haunt them? Emily, feeling conflicted, started to pull back. She wasn't sure if she was ready to open her heart to John again. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life, and the thought of letting him back in felt like a risk. But at the same time, there was a part of her that missed the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. John, noticing her hesitation, gave her space. He didn't want to pressure her. He knew that trust was something that had to be earned. He was determined to show her that he was committed to making things right, even if it meant taking things slowly. As the days passed, they found themselves at a crossroads. The spark was still there, but the path forward was uncertain. Neither of them knew what the future would hold, but they both realized that they had to face the challenges head-on, no matter how difficult it might be. Little did they know, something was about to happen that would change everything once again. The unexpected twist was just around the corner, and it would test both of them in ways they never could have imagined. It was a quiet evening when John received an unexpected call. He had been spending the day at the office, trying to catch up on a few projects, when the phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw Emily's name. Hesitant at first, he answered. "John!" Emily's voice came through the phone, sounding unusually calm. "We need to talk." He could sense there was something different about her tone. The usual tension and uncertainty from their past conversations had disappeared. This time, there was a clear resolve in her words. "Of course," John replied, his heart racing slightly. "What's on your mind?" Emily paused for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything," she said. John listened intently. He knew that Emily had been holding back, unsure of what to do, and he didn't want to push her. He had made so many mistakes before, and he didn't want to make the same ones again. "I'm not sure if I'm ready," she continued, her voice faltering slightly. "But I feel like I've been avoiding this for too long. Maybe it's time we really figure out what's next." John could hear the sincerity in her voice, and it gave him hope. He had been patient, giving her space to process everything, but he couldn't deny how much he wanted to rebuild their relationship. They agreed to meet the next day at a quiet park, the same place they used to go for walks when they were still together. It was a place full of memories, good and bad, but it felt like the right spot to have an honest conversation about their future. The next day, as they sat on the bench where they had shared so many moments in the past, the weight of their conversation hung in the air. John looked at Emily, trying to read her expression. "I've missed you," he said softly, breaking the silence. "I know I made mistakes, and I'm sorry for everything I did that hurt you." Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting the same emotions he was feeling. "I miss you too," she admitted. "But it's not just about missing each other. We've both changed, John. I've changed. And I need to be sure that we're not falling into old patterns." John took a deep breath. He understood what she was saying. They both had to be honest about their feelings, and they couldn't let the past dictate their future. "I know," he said. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work, even if it takes time." Emily looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of doubt. "It's not just about time," she said. "It's about trust. We need to rebuild that step by step." John nodded, agreeing completely. "I know. And I'm willing to take that step with you." For the first time in a long while, Emily felt a sense of hope. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but at that moment, sitting next to John, she felt like maybe they could find their way back to each other. Little did they know, the road ahead would not be as smooth as they hoped. There were still many challenges they would have to face, but for now, they had taken the first step toward healing. And that, for Emily, was enough. The weeks following their meeting in the park felt like a delicate balancing act. John and Emily were still finding their way back to each other, taking things slowly, but there was a sense of determination in both of them. They continued to spend time together, gradually rekindling the bond they had once shared. But the road to reconciliation was never as straightforward as it seemed. One evening, John invited Emily over to his house for dinner. It was a simple gesture, one that didn't carry any grand expectations, but it felt like a step in the right direction. As they sat down to eat, the conversation flowed naturally. They laughed about old memories, shared stories about their children, and for a brief moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But as the evening wore on, a quiet tension began to build. There were still so many unsaid things between them, so many questions that had yet to be answered. Emily noticed John's restlessness, the way he kept glancing at his phone, checking for messages. "You've been distracted tonight," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Is everything okay?" John hesitated. He had been juggling so much lately, work, personal life, and his attempts to rebuild his relationship with Emily. He didn't want to burden her with his problems, especially not when things were just beginning to feel right again. "I'm just dealing with some things at work," he said, offering a half-smile. "Nothing to worry about." But Emily wasn't convinced. She could see the stress in his eyes, the way his shoulders tensed whenever his phone buzzed. She knew he was keeping something from her. "John, you can't keep doing this," she said, her tone more serious now. "We're trying to rebuild trust, remember? That means being honest with each other, no matter how difficult it is." John's heart sank. He had promised to be more open, more honest, but old habits were hard to break. He didn't want to bring any negativity into the evening, but Emily was right. They had to be transparent if they were going to make this work. "You're right," he admitted, his voice low. "There's been a lot of pressure at work, and I've been handling it poorly. I didn't want to drag you into it, but I can't keep pretending like everything's fine." Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to both of them. "We're in this together," she said gently. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." John looked at her, his heart full of gratitude. He had been so focused on proving he could be a better partner that he had forgotten the importance of sharing his burdens. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of relief. They didn't have to be perfect, they just had to be real. The evening ended on a quiet note, both of them feeling a little lighter. There were still challenges ahead, but they were no longer facing them alone. They had made progress, and that was enough for now. But just as they began to feel like they were finding their rhythm, life threw another curveball their way. John's work situation escalated, and he was forced to make some difficult decisions that would ultimately test everything they had worked for. Little did they know, the true test of their relationship was about to begin. The pressure John had been under at work was beginning to take its toll. His company was facing a major project deadline, and the stress was mounting with each passing day. He tried his best to hide it from Emily, but she could sense the change in him. His usual warm, easygoing demeanor was replaced with short responses and distracted glances. One evening, after a long day at the office, John returned home late, looking exhausted. Emily was sitting on the couch, waiting for him. She had noticed how much he had been withdrawing recently, and it worried her. As he walked in, she could tell he was carrying more than just the weight of his work. There was something else, something deeper that he wasn't sharing. "John," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk. This can't keep going on. You're shutting me out." John stopped in his tracks, his hand on the doorframe. He looked at Emily, his face weary. "I'm fine," he said, though there was little conviction in his voice. Emily didn't buy it. "No, you're not. You're not fine. And I'm not going to pretend like everything's okay either." She stood up and walked over to him, her gaze steady. "I can't help you if you won't let me in. You're pushing me away, and I don't want to keep feeling like this." John felt a knot form in his stomach. He had promised Emily that he would be more open, but the pressure at work had made him retreat back into his old habits. He didn't want to burden her with his problems, but deep down, he knew she was right. he had to let her in. "You're right," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying to handle everything on my own, and I don't know how to deal with it." Emily reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You don't have to deal with it alone," she said gently. "We're in this together, remember? Whatever's going on, we'll face it as a team." John looked at her, his heart heavy with guilt. He had been so focused on his career and the demands of work that he had neglected the most important thing in his life, their relationship. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I've been so caught up in everything else, I lost sight of what really matters." Emily squeezed his arm, her expression softening. "I know you're under a lot of stress. But you have to trust me. We can handle this, but you need to let me help you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence hung between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a space where they both realized something important, that they were willing to fight for each other, even when things seemed impossible. John took a deep breath, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. "I don't want to keep making the same mistakes," he said. "I don't want to lose you." Emily smiled, her eyes softening. "You're not going to lose me," she reassured him. "But you have to keep fighting, not just for the work, but for us." John nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He knew that their path wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like they were on the same page. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure: he was ready to start putting in the effort, starting with being honest and present in their relationship. As the night wore on, the tension between them began to ease, and they sat together, quietly talking about everything and nothing at all. For now, that was enough. But as they looked ahead, they both knew that the real test was still yet to come. It had been a few weeks since their last conversation, and while things between John and Emily had been steadily improving, life had its own way of throwing curveballs. John had been working harder than ever, and though he was more open with Emily, he could feel the pressure mounting. He had taken on a new project at work, one that required his full attention, and it was starting to affect his personal life. Emily had been supportive, but she couldn't help but notice the strain in his eyes. One night, as they sat together on the couch after dinner, Emily couldn't hold back any longer. "John," she began, her voice soft but firm, "you've been pushing yourself too hard. I can see it, and I don't want you to burn out." John looked at her, his tired eyes meeting hers. He had been trying to juggle everything, but it was becoming too much. "I'm fine, Emily," he said, though there was little conviction in his words. "I'm just trying to get through this project. It's important." Emily reached out and gently placed her hand on his. "I know it's important, but so are you. And so are we. You can't keep working like this and expect everything to be okay." John sighed, feeling the weight of her words. He had promised to be more present, but the constant demands of work were pulling him away. He knew Emily was right, but it felt like he was stuck in a never-ending cycle. "I don't know how to balance it all," he admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "Every time I think I'm making progress, something else comes up. It's like I'm being pulled in 100 different directions." Emily's expression softened. She knew how much John cared about his work, but she also knew that he couldn't keep neglecting their relationship. "John, you don't have to do it all on your own. We're in this together. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Her words hit him like a wave of realization. He had been so focused on proving he could handle everything that he had forgotten the most important thing: his connection with Emily. She had always been there for him, supporting him through thick and thin, and yet he had been shutting her out. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been so focused on everything else that I lost sight of what really matters." Emily smiled gently, her hand still resting on his. "It's okay. We all get caught up sometimes. The important thing is that we're talking about it now. We can figure this out together." John nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew he didn't have to figure everything out on his own. With Emily by his side, they could tackle whatever came their way. As they sat together, in that quiet moment of understanding, John realized that the path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was one he was willing to walk. For Emily. For their future. And for the love that still lingered between them. The weeks continued to pass, and while John and Emily were slowly rebuilding their connection, there was still an underlying tension that neither of them could ignore. John's workload was overwhelming, and despite his promises to Emily, he found himself working late into the night, consumed by the pressures of his job. Emily, on the other hand, was trying to hold it together. She had her own commitments, balancing her time between raising their children and managing the household. Yet she couldn't help but feel the distance between them growing once more. One evening, as John returned home after another long day at the office, he found Emily sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes tired but determined. She looked up as he walked in, and for a moment, there was silence between them. "We need to talk," Emily said softly. John's stomach tightened. He knew what was coming. "I've been thinking about everything," she continued, her voice steady but filled with concern. "And I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I've been patient, John, but you're still not here. Physically, yes, but emotionally. I don't know if you're really present with me anymore." John took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. He had tried to be there for Emily, but work had been consuming him, and he hadn't realized how much his absence was affecting her. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "I've been trying, but it's hard. The pressure at work, everything is piling up, and I don't know how to balance it all." Emily looked at him, her expression softening. She could see the struggle in his eyes, but it didn't change the fact that she had been carrying so much on her own. "I know work is important," she said, "but so are we. So are you and me, John. I need you here, not just physically, but emotionally. I need you to be present, to be with me in this, not just worrying about what's next." The words stung, but John knew she was right. He had been so focused on the future, on the next project, the next deadline, that he had forgotten to be in the moment with her. "I've been selfish," he admitted. "I've been so caught up in my work that I've been neglecting the most important thing, our relationship." Emily shook her head gently. "It's not about being selfish, John. I understand how much your work means to you, but we can't keep living like this. You're here, but you're not really here." John took a step closer to her, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. "I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've let you down, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. I just need to figure out how to balance everything." Emily nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "I believe you, John. But we need to start making real changes, not just promises. I need to see you make the effort." John nodded in agreement. "I will. I promise." The conversation left them both feeling a little lighter, but they knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. John had a long way to go in terms of truly balancing his career with his personal life, and Emily knew it would take time for things to truly change. But for the first time in a long while, they both felt like they were on the same page. They had talked openly, expressed their fears and frustrations, and were willing to put in the work. It wasn't going to be a quick fix, but they were both committed to taking the steps needed to heal and rebuild their relationship, one day at a time. Months had passed since John and Emily's honest conversation, and although the road to healing wasn't always smooth, they found themselves growing closer again. John had taken significant steps to balance his career with his personal life, setting boundaries at work and making sure he was present for Emily and their children. Emily, in turn, was learning to trust him again, not just in the little things, but in the bigger picture of their future together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that meant everything to both of them. One evening, after a quiet family dinner, Emily and John sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. They had spent the day together, without distractions, and for the first time in a long while, there was peace between them. John took a deep breath, glancing at Emily. I've been thinking, he said, his voice calm but filled with uncertainty. About the future. About us. Emily turned to him, her eyes soft, waiting for him to continue. I know things haven't been easy, he started, and we've both made mistakes. But I want to make sure that we're not just getting by. I want us to truly rebuild. Not just for the kids, but for us. Emily nodded, her heart swelling with both love and gratitude. I want that too, she replied quietly. I know we've been through a lot, and I'm not expecting everything to be perfect, but I do want us to keep trying. We have to keep working on it together. John smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. I'm willing to do that, he said sincerely. I'm committed to making this work. I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I know I messed up, but I'm not giving up on us. They sat there for a while, the sound of crickets filling the air. Each of them lost in thought. For John, it was a moment of clarity. He realized that he had been so focused on his career that he had nearly lost the most important thing in his life, his family. But now, he knew what mattered. And Emily, too, had come to understand that love wasn't just about the good times. It was about fighting through the tough moments, supporting each other when things seemed impossible. As the weeks went on, their relationship continued to improve. They found small moments of joy in the ordinary things, a shared laugh, a quiet walk, a moment of understanding. Emily noticed how much more present John was, how he made an effort to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. He was there for her in ways that he hadn't been before. And in return, Emily started to let go of the walls she had built around her heart. She began to trust him again, slowly but surely. One day, while they were having lunch together, Emily reached across the table and took John's hand. I've been thinking, she said, her voice filled with warmth. I think we're really starting to figure this out. And it feels good. John squeezed her hand, smiling at her with the same love he had always felt, but now, it was stronger, deeper. We're not perfect, he said, but I think we're on the right path. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt hopeful. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they were facing it together, stronger than ever. It had been several months since John and Emily had started rebuilding their relationship, and although there were still bumps in the road, they both felt like they were finally on the right track. Their lives had settled into a new rhythm. John had cut back on his work hours, making more time for his family, and Emily had found a new sense of balance in her own life. They were learning to communicate better, to listen, and most importantly, to be present for one another. One afternoon, as they were sitting in the park with their children, Emily glanced over at John, noticing the contentment on his face as he laughed with their kids. A wave of gratitude washed over her. Despite everything they had been through, they had made it through to the other side, stronger and more united than ever. You know, Emily said, her voice soft as she watched him. I never thought we'd get here. There were times when I didn't think we'd make it. John looked at her, his expression thoughtful. Neither did I, he admitted. But we did, Emily. We're still here. Emily smiled, a sense of peace settling in her heart. I'm proud of us, she said quietly. We've come a long way. John reached over and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. We have, he agreed. And I'm not going to stop fighting for us. I'm going to keep showing up, every single day. It wasn't just a promise. It was a commitment to the future they were building together. Their relationship had been through so much, and while they knew there would still be challenges ahead, they were no longer afraid of them. They had learned how to face their problems as a team. That evening, after the kids were tucked into bed, John and Emily sat together on the porch, watching the stars slowly appear in the sky. The soft sounds of the night filled the silence between them, but this time, it was a comfortable silence, one of contentment. Do you think we're really ready for the next step? Emily asked, her voice gentle. I mean, after everything. John turned to her, his eyes warm and steady. I think we are. It won't be easy, but I know we can handle it. We've already handled so much. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with love for him. You're right, she said. We're ready. And we'll face whatever comes next together. And for the first time in a long while, both of them felt truly at peace with the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. They had weathered the storm and come out the other side, stronger and more in love than ever. The journey wasn't over, but they were no longer afraid of where it would take them. As long as they had each other, they knew they could face whatever came next, side by side.